Hi, I'm back again with another video. This time I'm interviewing a couple of people, Mitch and Laurie Stargrove. Now, a little backstory here. Mitch is a friend of my mother's, and then I met him through her. And he goes into the story about how he showed up at my hand fasting before I had ever met him. After the hand fasting had happened, and while my husband and I were packing up in the dark. So, hopefully you'll enjoy this video as much as I did. I have learned so much from these folks. And here are Mitch and Laurie Stargrove. Hi, this is Mitch and Laurie Stargrove.
Morning.
Hello.
So, thanks for agreeing to do the interview. And you got, like most of my interviewees, you were given the questions ahead of time. But I really want to start with how I got to know the two of you, because that's kind of an interesting story in and of itself. Mitch, do you remember?
Well, I know that in about 1982, I contacted this interesting woman in Ohio. And I remember we went to a book signing and got number 17 print of Nuit. And then there was the hand fasting that I tried to get to in time, and I got there just as you left, and your guests from Ohio were well on their way to our house where they were hanging out with Laurie soon.
And that person in Ohio was my mother.
Yeah.
For those who don't know that little connection there. So I didn't get to know Laurie until later in that week, I believe. So we hung out with you for a few moments before you headed back to town at the hand fasting. But Laurie wasn't with you that day.
Nope, she was at home.
Yeah. And so
where Maggie and Puff soon arrived.
I mean, I was aware of you. I started to see your name in various circles that I'm interfaced with, and then so here we are.
So it really goes back 30 plus years. That's amazing. Wow. So tell us what you do.
We operate in multiple levels and multiple frames, I think was how we might put it, of coming from the center outward of us and our home and the GaiaStar temple, and then sort of Portland area phenomenon, including a Blue Lotus Mystery School that's primarily aimed toward physicians and students. And then there's sort of the Cascadian level with Oregon Country Fair and Cascadia Fire. And then the larger family of fire, the sort of concentric circles. What else?
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot.
It is.
I mean, yeah.
So let's start with GaiaStar Temple. What is this? Explain it to the general public of, all 50 of my viewers.
Well, the GaiaStar Temple is a physical location out here in the Tualatin River Valley, including an 11-sided temple building, 11-sided in honor of Nuit, because it's a place where stars are born or reconnected. Some of you may have seen one of these objects around.
Hold it a little closer to the camera. Ah, yes.
This is one of the focusing devices of the GaiaStar Temple. And what do we do there? We do work with Horus Mott Lodge in a long-term relationship. We do work with local naturopathic and Chinese medicine students and practitioners and other people interested in self-healing.
We host rituals, Adina Sampradaya rituals, pujas.
We have a Sekhmet refuge.
Sekhmet refuge.
God, the things like that. So we do things on various cycles. We have teaching events, sort of both in exoteric and esoteric layers. And also it tends to be a bit of a base for some of the Cascadia fire community.
And so when you say work, I kind of know what you mean, but are we talking about spiritual work, physical work, medical work? What kind of work are we talking about?
Yeah, I was thinking when
we're sort of
talking about this.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how it relates to GaiaStar Temple. I was thinking how it is, I think, important to note that it's also the logo of our clinic. We're both naturopathic physicians, and Mitch is an acupuncturist as well. And that is actually the clinic, our Wellspring Clinic's logo. So there's this continuous, this goes to the work, you know, weaving of our life. And really this notion of work is, it's all work or it's not any of it's work. And clearly we all know what the burden of work can feel like, but let's call it our individual and our collective,
capital W.
Yeah. You know, as a, I don't know if I want to say subset of the great work, but, you know, as an aspect, we'll say, right, that weave. So it's a very difficult thing to separate. And that's by design.
And one of our core themes is really that from the center of you outward comes this rippling of who you are in your truest self. We're sort of non-dualist or non-triist, or certainly non-dualist in that we operate that spirit and matter of equal value. So we're not like top-down kind of people. So it's center out and out back to center. This rippling, like breathing, of how we relate to the environment of our relationships and the place. We're very dedicated to knowing and cultivating our relationship with the river valley that we live in. And because we're very Gaian. And in fact, lots of times when people use the word pagan, that we're really using the word Gaian a lot more, because pagan is really relating to European traditions, and it's often misunderstood, especially by the people who use the term. And Oberon actually was here 2 years ago, right before the plague, and we released this I am, we are Gaia healing motif. And we were discussing with him, since he's one of the originators of the word pagan in common usage, that Gaian is really, you know, when you look at political divisions and country divisions and all that, is we're all Gaians. And that has come to the front, and what takes care of the planet will take care of us. And that can't be divided between our neighborhood and somebody across the world. So that's one of our primary agendas at this time. And as a dear friend of ours, Terry, said one day when we were in the dining room, she said, are we really birthing the new Aeon in Cascadia? And we were like, well, shit, sure looks like it. Seems to be our assignment. So we're here on assignment of being a landing place and a place to encourage people to be their true selves and to work with their ancestors. And a big thing actually related to the current that your mother cultivated in her many personae, of connecting with the future. You know, people are talking to their ancestors all the time, and like, who's talking to you? So how do we connect to the future and the past to be in the here and now and know that they're all present? And how do we use our work and just our daily lives? You know, it's very much Malkuth is divine. And how are we using that to bring connection to healthy futures? And ask them, hey, give us a few hints.
Yeah, that's a big job.
But I mean, it's the big job, and it's the mundane job. It's the job of how do you, walk the dog? Do you do it with joy, or do it with, I have to walk the dog? Or, like put flowers for Sekhmet. Is that a task or is that a joy? And, it can be both.
Yeah, that's an excellent way of looking at that. So you kind of answered the second question of which aspects of paganism, which of course Gaianism at this point, do you identify with? But did I miss any parts of that?
Oh, it's interesting when you sent the questions, I first wrote, oh, I'm a Gaian Matian. Oh no, maybe I'm a Matian Gaian. Oh no, and then I played with all the letters, capital A's and lowercase A's and all the words that it could create.
And then there's the Egyptian current and the tantric current, and
yeah. And then so it's interesting. I had a conversation with a friend of ours, and I said, oh yeah, I said I'm like a Gaian Matian. What do you think of that? And he said, like, oh, you guys know Denny. Well, you know Denny. Denny Sargent. Yeah. Denny's like, no, you're like an intuitive magician. I'm like, this is important. I think it's like, I would say maybe emergent magician in the sense that, the Gaian motif requires us to be in full relationship with our community, our environment, ourselves, our tribe, right? That is the meta perspective that has to be embodied, earthed, and realized. And that's a big piece of work, as you said, right? And it's a beautiful iteration of a healthy future and a way that we can live in a sustainable, regenerative manner. So, it's truly as above, so below, as below, so above in these dimensions, I think. And we focus a lot of our work on the relational aspects of magic. And that might be in part because it makes sense in terms of the model that we use it, but it also makes sense because we're clinicians, so we're in continuous relationship.
And it's the Matian aspect. I mean, in many respects, we have this primary work form At. It has a new aeon flavor to it because that's the time we're in. We have this temple hosted really with the theme of the Blue Lotus. One message I heard from a goddess one day was that the Blue Lotus is the birth canal of Nuit. And yes, we have the Blue Lotus is represented in our star flower motif.
It's the ever emerging, fruiting
the poof
of life, right? It's the constant reemergence, the continuous reemergence of life
and true self.
And that's
and that responding to the environment and that coming and going. So it's a really amazing motif, and you'd be surprised. Well, I think you've maybe experienced the dynamics of sound in an 11-sided building are very peculiar too.
Okay, so did we answer your question?
You very much did.
Okay,
yes,
good.
And I do have to point out that I did interview Denny Sargent 2 interviews ago. Okay. So anybody who's watching this who wants to get to know about Denny's work, there's another video going on there.
Yeah, and actually there is we're long-term parallel path people, and Denny is sort of a serial monogamous maniac with his themes, and he's got these different tantric themes and Egyptian themes and now the wolf theme, and some of those were heavily intertwined with what Denny's doing, and some of them we're stepping back and waiting for the dust to settle, and Denny's enthusiasm and puppy behavior calms down, and then we see, okay, what did we absorb of that, and what were we already doing, and what are we going to carry forward, and happy for his success and what he brings to the world.
Yeah, I think it's a great reminder that we are all really working on the same project, so to speak. And that being the evolution of where we're at.
And the value of magical allies. Yeah. In the sense that we're not necessarily doing it all the same way, but we're doing, if you will, the same, right? And you see, like, we need the diversity. That's a fundamental requirement of a healthy ecosystem, diversity.
So actually, you asked about an event that might be relevant here. Is just part of how we work. Was one day, I think it was late at night, right after Fukushima, And we were watching all these friends trying to do banishing rituals and all kinds of like what we would call anti-magic, right? And not bad in
not
some
in a bad
ethical
way.
sense, but it's against something. Just like in medicine, there's the things you do for the body and the health and the things you do against the disease. And we're sort of 80% healthy and 20% clean up the mess kind of thing. But we were talking with Denny and just sort of bemoaning everybody wanting to do something to the accident and the emissions. And we
were talking about the dangers of the notion of we're going to put on like protective suits and go clean up radiation.
Yeah.
It's just
there
like,
are all kinds of stuff going on. And we, as part of our sort of longer term conspiracy that we work with Denny, or really, no, we have to work on transmuting it. That really, this is a relationship of humanity as a whole relating to Gaia as a whole. And because one of us and Gaia is sort of out of scale, whereas all of us as humanity and Gaia are at the same scale. And that collectivity is known in some artwork and some words coming from your very mother as this concept or this being named Naton. And Naton is the collective, it's half the humanity as many individuals and half humanity as one individual. And really like, okay, Naton is the scale at which we have to work with Gaia to transmute Fukushima, because we're all mutating, so we should steer and we should transmute. And so we really started this theme of the alchemy of the dance of Gaia and Naton. And this just happened because of an 11 o'clock at night phone call. And then Denny afterwards said, years ago, I had this dream of that conversation. And it's like,
and there was
okay, we're there. Like, you know, our friend Nicky Scully says, your only job is to show up. Show up and pay attention.
And then kind of in a parallel universe around that time, there was a lot of Sekhmet and Ptah arising and presenting themselves to us to work with magically, and their offspring is Nefertum. And so there was a lot of mycelial literally on the land here, and in a lot of magical realities, mixing, a lot of mixing, a lot of new information. And I think that's what I mean by like the emergence, in the sense that, you know, it's so very important in my observation to deeply pay attention to what is occurring in our environment, not to judge it, just to observe it and to understand that that is an invitation to work magically. When things present themselves to us repeatedly, or a pattern emerges from just our everyday life or our deep stress, or, you know, or what have you, it's like, for me, that's a very, and you see that in that, you know, it takes you to the land, like the social justice piece that you did, the filming, and that was a beautiful manifestation of exactly that. Like, what is going on? You know, what is happening, and how, because we know that the magic benefits the all. When we show up and we do it well, right? You get it, I get it, we get it, Gaia gets it, the neighborhood in Cincinnati gets it, and on and on and on.
And an example of that too in the environment is that we have been very bee-centric for a very long time, and that has moved, you know, this whole, when the bee is themselves, the hive thrives, and when the hive thrives, the bee thrives. And then we started having these problems after years of bees, like literally waking up and there's bees outside our bedroom window because we have 2 hives there, and doing that for years. And now the last couple of years, particularly since the big fires, the bees just like aren't holding, but instead mushrooms are happening. And just the mushrooms, and our friends are into mushrooms, and there's mushrooms in our yard, and we're inviting more, and you start talking about them and they start showing up.
And a lot of owl. I mean, we're blessed. We live in beautiful countryside, and we have owl. And
so, you know, the bee is the above, and now we've got this underworld thing happening. And these, you know, it's just paying attention and going with what's happening. Is like, we're not going to force the bee thing if the bees aren't happening, but the mushrooms are presenting themselves. And if you know mushrooms, you know, if they present themselves, they've been working on it for a while already. So we're just catching up with them usually. And one of our big themes is this post-binary spectral embodiment is sort of like a catchphrase of post-binary, that in some respects we're doing Kemetic Old Kingdom Tantra with Sekhmet and Ptah and Nefertum, that whenever you have the two, you have the third. You never have a static duality. You always have the third popping, and then come the 10,000 things. And how do you be at that point of the spark of the two always producing the new thing? I mean, that's very Shiva too, is like, yes, you die and reborn each moment. And in the Egyptian motif, the blue lotus is where that birthplace is. And this notion of really being not just, you know, people talk about being non-binary, is like, it's like alternative medicine. Like, that doesn't mean much. What is it actually? It's post-binary. You don't get rid of binary. Binary, you know, we got dogs, one's a boy and one's a girl. But humans have a different diversity. All kinds of systems have more complex diversity. So it's really spectral. And that also says heaven and earth are of equal value. I mean, there's a fellow named Frater Akkad, who was really the first priest of Ma'at in the modern era. And his whole theme is, yeah, we're bringing it. Malkuth and Kether are coming back together again. And the Aeon of the Sun is about the individual coming to awareness, but it's the collectivity and the context and the application of Ma'at, of the living in truth and justice on the earth, in the physical plane. Because we all know lots of people who are great musicians and can't make a living. And we all know lots of people who are great magicians and have a great awareness, and they can't find a home. And all of that. And when you honor Kether, you honor Malkuth. And that's, you know, something that is, we don't get into controversy, but we do irk some of our friends who tend to use more dualistic language. And it's like, yeah, we love our dualisms, and that's why we love post-binary.
So
I like that concept of post-binary.
Hey, I have this inspiration to, well, maybe not, but maybe, but I was thinking that perhaps we could talk a little bit about some of the like non-Stargrovia, i.e. this piece of land-based activities that we do. Is that something that you'd like us to do? Like we've worked for like a long time with Altered Space at Oregon Country Fair, which is
take it back one step further.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah.
And then Cascadian
long ago, 30 some years ago in Portland, there were no pagan groups. And a group of us, many of whom you know, and many of whom don't associate with each other directly much anymore, but still all are hooked together, had the Portland Mythological Society at the library downtown, because they wouldn't let a religious group use a room, so we had to be a mythological study group. And out of that came the first Northwest fall equinox pagan festivals.
Okay, so it was so dry here, pagan-wise, that some of you probably remember a restaurant called Old Wives' Tales. It sat on the corner of, I don't know, 13th and Burnside for infinity. And it,
I remember
it had the good salad bar and was actually open from 9 to 10 when no other restaurants were.
And they're
woman-owned and kid-friendly, and had all the right parameters. Anyway,
I ate there,
That restaurant had a community bulletin board, which was epic. And I remember going with my 3x5 index card, like, woman just moved from Twin Cities looking for other pagan community members or activities. Like, that's like how it ran.
Actually, the first time I set foot in there was with a guy named Marcus Tempe, who you may know from KBOO Radio, as he ran the witching hour on Sunday mornings, and it was called himself the Bear. That was long ago. Anyway, so
then from the
Portland Mythological Society
to Altered Space.
Right.
Altered space you were going to move into, and I said
You were
jump
talking
back
about
to
the altered
Oregon
space
Country
at the
Fair.
country fair.
Oh, I don't know the connection between those two at all, but I can speak to altered space.
I'm a historian.
Well,
I do things sequentially
Okay.
sometimes.
I want to let me come back to the questions that we started with, and Lori, there will be room for this
Okay.
later down the road. But the one question I wanted to ask, and we know how, but pretty much how all of this has affected your lives, right? This is what we've been talking about. But how the heck did the two of you get into magic from wherever it was you came from in the first place?
It's a good question. I like that you asked the question because it made me think about it. So, I remember being 4 and asking my mom about the concept of God being everywhere in a little Jewish monotheistic, I guess that's kind of redundant, household. And I remember in Sunday school, it didn't go very well, asking about the idols and why we only burned white candles, and basically asking the question, like asking about all the Egyptians, right? All the Egyptian behaviors that were verboten. And I think then, and I was very fortunate that I had a family that, like, nature was exalted. I mean, we just drove around and went to magnificent, beautiful places and oohed and awed. And then I found plant medicine, I think, was, in a sense, that was, if you will, maybe my direct entry that, and then I was about 18. And, then I just started paying attention to goddess things. Starhawk was very, I think, early witchy influence. And that was kind of my way for a while. And that made sense to me. And then we started, I don't know, fast forward a little bit, Portland, early pagan circles, activities, some Isis stuff and various equinox and things. And then we ran into a very, very dear friend of ours, Nicky Scully. And Nicky really informed a lot and has had a lot of, and thank you, Nicky, like profound influence, because she's one of our dearest, oldest friend and allies. And she has a pretty, like, profoundly direct access generated on, to Egypt. And Mitch came into my life when I was about 20 with a lot of ideas. And, we kind of,
and weird friends.
Yeah. And we discovered things together, Thelema, Tantra, in the early years. So it honestly, it was just like this, it just kind of kept coming. It just kind of kept coming and creating. That's how I don't think that, other than maybe, Tara and Ganesh, I don't think I've ever actually like tried to like actively come to me, if that makes sense. It's like, we have a very large Sekhmet statue in our yard. She doesn't really seem, I mean, she's large out of context, but she's really just small in this yard. And she holds a profound stability. And I mean, I've said for a long, long, long time that my capacity to have her here on this land is because of my relationship with Ma'at. Like that is the temperance that I need for that. And just like you said, the weird characters, I was just thinking, like, our friend Oriel gave me a picture of Sekhmet that was so intense that I literally kept it rolled up in the drawer for years and years. And
wow.
It took a long, so I'm a slow or quick adopter. Yeah. Right. And
yeah. Well, I'm going to ask Mitch the same question of how you got into.
I was sort of an anti-religious person for a long time, partially because I was altar boy and even altar boy of the year. And my mother always said, you know, hey, you should be a priest. And I said, well, if I can have a family and I can like have more than one religion. And she didn't like that idea. So so I was mostly more of a social justice person until, but I was a Gandhian. So Satyagraha is a core part of my understanding of things. And in fact, the word Satyagraha, Satya is truth, Graha is force. Horus, not Satyagraha. But then when I was 23, and I actually had a degree in history and government with a focus on comparative revolution. And then I was working at a co-op in Minneapolis, and two things happened. A book from a friend he'd given it to me when I was at Oberlin College, and I pulled it out, called Cosmic Trigger, which I'd recommend giving to all your unassuming friends. In fact, we had Uncle Bob stay with us for a weekend, and that was quite an event. And then shortly thereafter, a friend of mine, well, she became a friend of mine, walked in the door. See, at the co-op, they had this logo of an old Coca-Cola seal with painted over with a rainbow and a lightning bolt. And this woman walked in and the lightning bolt flashed, and that didn't usually happen. So I paid attention to that, and probably 2 days later, she gave me a Thoth deck and the Book of Thoth. So I entered into that construct from the end of it, not from the beginning of it, with that heavy Lady Frida Harris component. And that all sort of like, you know, I had the image of the eye and the triangle on top of the pyramid. Is like I had the pyramid, now I've got the eye and the triangle, and I in fact use that like that symbol is very similar to the anarchist A, if you notice. You just have to turn that top of the A into the little I, and then the anarchists are really like the healthy Illuminati. So that then shortly thereafter, and this is 1981, I was doing my typical research style, and I ran into this group of people who were doing what I was looking for, where there was a mixing of neo-pagan and Thelemic stuff in sort of a post-Crowleyan, more earthy, more balanced masculine, feminine kind of scenario. This Horus Mott Lodge people, and particularly Anandahadna and, you know, Maggie and Denny, and those became sort of the cohort, which sort of made me a heretic among heretics. And then I became a heretic within that group as I developed my own approach. But first person, when I moved to Portland in the summer, the first people I met were Nestor Perala and Steve Marshall and that group of people. And then I drove up to Bellingham and met Denny, because we'd been corresponding for a couple of years. And then I met him. And well, he was a dangerous goof, was one of our best friends. And then things just proceeded from there, you know, with working with the pagan festivals. But, you know, we're always operating under multiple models. So we're doing puja one weekend, and then doing more of a pagan solstice the next weekend, and then doing something that's more about Ma'at and Sekhmet the next weekend. So
it's a lot of weekends.
and that just sort of I mean, one of our primary acts that we consider a social act and a magical act is networking. One of our main jobs is to introduce people to each other and create circles and overlapping circles, and just, you know, like, oh, you need to meet this person. And we're pretty well known for doing that sort of matchmaking on a social level. And we consider it part of our, you know, medical practices, sort of social healing, of bringing people back together and creating community. Because in the long run, people used to identify with the land, and we are the people, and everybody just called themselves the people. And where did they live? They lived on the land. And as people were they were colonized, pushed out of the countryside. Everybody forgets in the colonialism argument that the Europeans colonized the Europeans first, and that the folk culture is destroyed and people are detached from the land, and then they go mess up other people's relationship to their land. And that now the land we relate to is the whole planet. So we have to be bioregionally grounded, but we have to be aware on a global level, and we have to bridge those two things. And that's really, in many respects, our work. So out of that, I teach history of medicine with that kind of liberatory slant. We run medical practice in a clinic that is really run almost as a temple. You know, the feel of it, the iconography around, the way people open up there, that things they typically don't do, and the fact that we like them to walk out different than they came in. So, you know, and we love to do magic with our friends. Working with the people in Vegas, we learned a lot about the family of fire and the Vegas vortex. And we had a friend named Johnny Dwork who brought that to Cascadia. And then we started bringing together a group of our own friends to create another one. And that's, you know, each of these places like the Oregon Country Fair, these are all places where the magic is the people coming together and the things that are unimagined and unexpected that happen when the people come together with shared intent in some kind of collective vessel. And that's creating new culture, which to me is like, that's the big magic.
Right. The temporary autonomous zones, as they call them, that pop up.
It's interesting. I was thinking about the capacity to adapt, right? That's been clearly kind of the, you know, a necessity of COVID, great teaching, right? This requirement truly to be adaptive and, you know, fluid. And
that's a theme of Sekhmet too, with self-healing, that the healing comes from inside, constantly responding to the situation with love.
So
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
You were going to say something, Lori?
Oh, I was just going to say, so we've actually, in the last few years, wandered into some projects that we've never done before, like by necessity or by creativity, you know, right? So, yeah, like we, well, we can talk a little bit more about Fire Circle in proper context, but we, like GaiaStar Temple, you know, hosted a mock Convergence this year. And it was like, you know, all on this platform, right? And all from people all over the world, like a miracle, and amazing humans coming together and talented video people. And, you know, just like that, weaving that web is a very, it's really integral to the work we do. It's like bringing together people, and it works, you know?
And the weird part is we had, as we were doing it, we were approaching it like a physical event because we've had many events we've organized. And then we start realizing, oh, Normandy has to record hers beforehand. Oh, we've got the past actually showing up. Some people were live, and then we put the whole thing online so that the future is actually participating, so that the event is actually manifesting the principle. It's not just talking about the principle, it's actually, oh, we can talk to the future, and the future can look back at this and say, oh, here's some of the guideposts. And you know, this is not planned that way. We just thought, oh, we're going to get these people we know to talk about something that's important. And you know, and then again, out of that comes, oh, the one speaker now wants to know the other speaker. And it's like, good. It's growing. You know, we both sort of have an earthy agricultural aspect underlying a lot of this too. We like to see things grow. Maybe it's the mycelial thing.
Well, I think that also answers question number 7 about serving the greater community. I mean, that's pretty much all the two of you do, isn't it? Serve the greater community.
You know, we take care of ourselves and each other and the land and our pets and our children, and yeah.
Well, talk about altered space.
Space is a place that has functioned as an altar and temple of the Oregon Country Fair. And that is more explicit what I just said than it was. It was a place that actually about, I don't know how many years maybe 30 years ago or so, the executive director of the Oregon Country Fair came to Nicky Scully and said, hey, we found like this, it was like a little public park in the Oregon Country Fair in the 8 of the Oregon
Shady
Fair.
Grove.
Shady Grove, yeah. We found heroin needles, and this is not copacetic with anything that we want to have here. Could you alter the space? And Altered Space was born as, so it was born as this alchemical, transmutive, transformational zone. And it's gone from a little, it's always been an altar, and now it's a really large temple.
Healing areas,
healing.
art, kids' crafts, a fire,
Yeah,
a
so-
stage almost,
So,
a night
so-
temple.
so about 10 years ago or 12 years ago, the invitation to have the altar at part of Altered Space open at night, as opposed to just like during the day, which of course, like the temples don't close, right? And then we started to hold a night temple, what we call, and then it became, like for me at least, the magic dialed up phenomenally, and the capacity, because one of the most unique things about Oregon Country Fair. So here you have, and you know, and Mitch and I are like there's a lot of people who are coming to hold this night temple space because it's very profound. You have this beautiful temple that has now had thousands and thousands and thousands of people pray in or walk by or attend to or ooh and ah. And then at night, the pathway of the fair goes right through the temple space.
With a river on the far side.
So there's a river, and we invited, and we're blessed in our spheres to have extraordinarily talented musical friends, as well as having that Nicky Scully Grateful Dead backdrop, to have this incredible experience of sacred music, conscious sacred music, the altar in its full glory, the sacred fire, which later came, that we housed the fair elementals. And through this magical container that we're holding as such, a group of us, right? Through this beautiful, has to be fluid, because there's a trail of trippers and
No drunks.
yeah, fortunately, right? Musicians, you know, there's, you know, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people, maybe not thousands in the evening, moving through. So it was a kind of a qigong magical direct. It's amazing,
To
right?
build a
Just-
high, heavy, active temple with people going through it, and how do you maintain the fluidity and the integrity and keep the charge?
And we should say the altar is like, I mean, this is a very profoundly deep altar. I mean, there is, you know, gifts from many, many people for a long time who brought gifts to this altar and were housed on Nicky's land, and, you know, a very precise configuration and adorned with magnificence of the bounty of flowers. Okay, so you get it. So that was like,
Yeah.
it was like big time training wheels. Big time. Really, really, really learned a lot. You know, like when the wild person shows up and they want to like rip something off the altar, or somebody decides it's so juicy we should just make love in there, you know,
Or have a
And-
wedding.
or have a wedding
Mhm.
or thing. So that's something that we've been blessed to be involved in for 12 years. No, fair
15,
longer.
16
But
years.
Mitch and I, like when Nicky was like, oh, anybody want to like keep the temple open at night? You know, Mitch and I were like, we're like, okay, you know, of course this is already must have been planned eons ago or something. We had no idea what that would become or what the transformation would be magically to the whole entirety of the space.
Yeah, it does sound like it was a phenomenon to behold.
Yeah, it was pivotal. It's not just our doing. I mean, there was other people involved, like a ally of ours, Indigo Runlove, who's very been, she was the vice president of the Oregon Country Fair. She was our cohort, and she's
a Matian.
She's totally a Matian, and knows how to work with fair. So it grew and it changed, and the beauty of it is that it really now we don't know what anything is in a sense for the future, but it was never talked about. It's always talked about altered space, and it's not a booth. It's like, it's there as an entity of Oregon Country Fair, but now we openly call it the temple and of the fair. And it really became in this process. It went from, if you will, one person's vision, which was Nicky, to the temple of the Oregon Country Fair. So it's a great honor to just even participate, let alone be able to be so influential and witness that evolution.
So an interesting crossweave. The way or the circumstance that I met Nicky was I saw a thing about Starwood, and I saw Nicky and Maggie were going to be there. And I called up Nicky, who I had never talked to before, and I said, "Hi, we're both friends of Tahuti. I think that you should go meet this person here, because you two I know you would really like each other." And she said, "Well, that's interesting. I don't know who you are, but I spent last weekend with her," because that event was 2 weeks ago. So I met Nicky in the context of connecting her with Maggie, who she had already connected with. Sometimes the timeliness is like, it happens in multiple places at once or something like that. So that
really does.
And Nicky has become one of our closest friends and allies. And then we connect in our dear friend Normandy Ellis, who's part of many of our more neo-Egyptian adventures, including going to Egypt. So, and what about Cascadian fire?
Yeah.
Well, see, one thing in this scenario, the we part, is I'm often the person who might make pictures or write words or like invite specific people, but Lori's often the key infrastructure person.
Often. I think that you can omit often.
Well, you're always present in that.
I have been, although I'm wiser and older, and
so we're moving more to a network phenomenon than a management phenomenon.
Yeah, I still dig through recycling bins, and I don't cut wood anymore. But other than that,
This is good to know. Yes, there's a time you got to stop doing that. Do you feel like your spiritual work and your spiritual life keeps you mentally above water, or do you think that it contributes to excessive cortisols or any heavy stress hormones? How do you think it affects those states of mind?
for me,
Yes.
well, I don't. It's interesting. I think we just talked about a lot that seems as if it's whoa, maybe, or a lot, or heavy, or whatever. And
right.
But it's not. It's the magic of it is that it's happening. It's this it truly is the lotus, right? It's not like yes, it could be considered hard work, but it's happening. The people appear, the formula is to trust life.
I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that clearly is tricky in our daily reality when we're waiting for the repairman and they haven't come, or whatever, right?
Or you're treating the patient with a severe disease.
Yeah. There's a lot of whatever. So, I think, it's interesting because being a physician, it's a really good training for this type of work, because to truly show up and meet someone in a respectful way, it's not that we're not attached to the outcome. We always hear that in the physical dimension, we have attachment. We want things to be good for other human beings. But there is a broader calling to allow and trust what is and what is becoming. And that takes a continuous reminding, you know, and I think that having a practice, whatever it may be, mantra, yoga, whatever your nature walk, whatever, a practice of self-cultivation, right, is a critical component. And I think that keeping the rhythms, keeping some connection with the rhythm, like it's interesting, like, you know, I'm a little bit of a outsider in the, like, I'm not that connected to the moon rhythms. I mean, I'm aware of them, right? But they're just not my primary go round. I'm far more connected to sunrise and sunset. I have more like equinox and solstice, you know, connection. But whatever it is for whoever, like that rhythm, right? Now I'm being the doctor, you're asking me about me and I'm telling you about everybody else. I apologize.
That's great.
Anyway,
I love it.
But really that's important, because really the same way that we live is the guidance that we share, ideally, right? It's not like we're like telling people to eat well and then like going in the back room and putting Cheetos down our throat. That's not good. That's not good magic or medicine. Yeah. I sometimes feel burdened by the sheer the amount of work, like they're, you know, on the physical plane. And I sometimes feel I do sometimes feel that it's very important to do it well. I don't, you know, and so, you know, it takes a great amount of time to do things well, and attention. Yeah, a lot of resource allocation. So I think that for us, because the weed is quite large, we have to be precise where we put our attention.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Did you want to add anything to that question there, Mitch?
Well, I mean, I'm a multiple Virgo on top of Pluto. So for me, magic is a way to explain or frame everything, because every moment seems like really profound and intense and transformative. And when I try to pretend it isn't, it usually shows me that it is. So to me is, you know, I mean, I do acupuncture. I'm literally like doing invocation and organization of people's bodies on multiple levels all the time. And I mean, I want to view driving down the road as a magical act. You know, it's almost like this notion in some systems, they talk about the oath of the abyss, and that you start to take every moment in life as some kind of interaction with deity, or, you know, the ultimate or something. And part of me is like, well, isn't that the way it always is anyways? I mean, like, that's when we're being ourselves, and that's whether we're being nice to the dog or whether we're listening to someone who's telling you things that you've heard from them many times. All of those things are just, you know, to me, it's all a package deal, and I can't just go say, oh, I like this part and I don't like that part. Yeah, like hauling wood is part of the fire. So if you want to have a fire, like, unless you're paying people or you're the boss, neither of which are our favorite motifs, then, like, you know, even if I don't haul the wood, I'm going to be someone who's part of the project that the wood's involved in. And ultimately, that's part of manifesting it. And I feel like, yeah, I've done parts of my life, or maybe some past life, where, you know, oh, I can be a monastery and go into deep meditation and have all kinds of wonderful things happen. But, like, it's got to be real. It's got to filter down. And actually, that's why I use the term Satyagraha warrior more than the term bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is very nice to be transforming everybody with your love and compassion, but, like, you've got to get out there and do a little street anarchist sometimes, and organize an event sometimes. But the secret of that, I learned, like, when I deal with a lot of my radical friends, is a lot of radicals want to be the one who yells something and goes to the front of the crowd. And I'd rather be the one who yells something and melts back into the crowd. So
I like that metaphor. I do. So we are coming up to the top of the time we have allocated here. I do want to ask, because I'm sure that both of you have a great answer to this, so I'm going to ask you separately. Advice to seekers on the path.
my simple advice is be true to yourself. I'm not of the school of abdication of the self, and the self is a bad thing and the ego is a bad thing. The ego is the true you behind the masks. It's the star in our local system. So be yourself, be bold, be strong, and be humble and be compassionate. And you have to do both. It's a feedback loop. And you are the, it's like the me as a person, the me as a couple, the me as a family, the me as a river valley, and me as Cascadia. Those all have to line up. And to look for feedback in every moment, whether that's the numbers on the license plate, or the bulletin board you're going by, or the 2-second snippet on the radio. And the universe is always talking and always showing you and giving you a little nudge this way and a little nudge that way. It's like, oh, I want to go to Powell's to buy a book. And if I don't find a parking place 2 times around, I guess I shouldn't buy a book today. If you drive up and the parking place is in front of the concert, like, hey, we're in the right place. And when you're not in the right place, what do you learn from it? So I'm always approaching it. I mean, it's always like digesting life and bringing it through and pushing back, and that back and forth and this back and forth. And how do we be strong? And, and that's where the Sekhmet part, but the Ma'at part is about justice and about feedback and the healthy for the whole system. And we have to do both. And people say, oh, it's challenging and oh, it's horrible times, but it's like, hey, we're here because it's that time. And everybody I know who's in intense with themselves pretty much says, yeah, shit, I always had this idea, this might be the time. And maybe not this lifetime, I'd like to coast and watch TV and go to the soccer game. And it's like, you can watch TV and go to the soccer game, but that's not going to change the fact that life, it was totally different 20 years ago, and 30 years from now, it's going to be way different. And we have to not just be against that. We have to find where the healthy growth is and move with it and be part of it.
That's an excellent answer. I like that. So Lori, I like the way that you said, you looked at Mitch and said, go for it.
Yeah. Well, that's a good answer.
Yeah, it's hard to top, isn't it?
I mean, it's not about topping, it's just, I want to say ditto. And I think that, I guess the few things I would add would be something about like how, pay attention to what's around you, like what reemerges and what is like asking to speak to you in a sense or tell you something. And that, to me, that means like a lot of noticing, a lot of observation. You look at a lot of systems, sophisticated systems of organization, and observation is a primary ingredient, right? So that just that pause and that receive and just notice what you're hearing, smelling, tasting. Does it repeat? What's calling to you, if you will. And then I think there's the other piece is like a generosity, extending a generosity to yourself in terms of like magical traditions, spiritual traditions are old, they're complex, they're full, right? And it's like diving in can be overwhelming. You might not know the language, you may not be able to get a certain work or book or something that you want to, and so just to like let it unfold through more time than just immediate. So like I find that things are concurrently magically developing, right? And you might not know if you're thinking like, oh, I can't get through this first chapter of this book now, and then you put it aside. And right, and it's just like, just be aware that that's still there, that it's your own web is being woven, right? And not to really just like renounce what we've done or that didn't work, or something, just to be open to it continually informing you in a way. That's another thing I think that people often, get frustrated, like they can't chant the language, say, right? And then they just think, well, then I'm not, yeah, right.
Right.
To not, in a sense, approach it like, as a Western educational experience, right?
Yeah, that's a different way to approach things.
Thank you. Listen, thank you for inviting
Like,
us.
you keep kicking the.
Oh, I'm jiggling the table. That's what
Which
you're telling
makes the camera jiggle.
me. Well, that's okay. We get the
Where's-
fluid part.
So that ended a little abruptly. I do apologize for that. I'm still getting my editing chops down. Do subscribe to the channel, though, if you like this content. I will be bringing on more videos later this month, and some other really educational videos. So thanks for watching, and take care. Bye-bye.